Sorry, those pesky neighbors taking a walk. It's just can't have that. Can you
Yeah,
still
I got this.
can you hear them?
Yeah, yeah. I got the same thing here. I got a hound dog, so I know the deal.
All right, let me see if I can get them to chill out. I am joined today on Between the Levees by Lieutenant Tim Veach, who I met in Morgan City when I took over canal dispatch responsibilities back in early 2019. Lieutenant Veach, thank you very much for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me, Tim.
Well, as I know you've seen most all these episodes, you know how this goes. Please tell me, sir, where were you born?
I was born in Jeffersonville, Indiana.
How was life growing up there?
It's pretty good. You get all four seasons. I grew up along the Ohio River, uh, back when Jeff Boat was open, and they were making lots of barges and tugs out of there. At one point, it was the nation's largest inland tug builder, and a lot of people I went to school with worked there until they shut down. And so the river's always been a way of life for me. We owned property on the river growing up, and I learned how to swim in the Ohio River. I don't tell a lot of people that, but that's where I learned how to swim. And my family's worked on the rivers for many years.
I know, of course, of your father. Who else in the family was on the river?
My wife's father and her grandpa both worked on the river, and one of them worked for Ingram. Her grandpa worked for Ingram, and then another one worked, I believe, it was Ohio Valley Towing, out of the on the Tennessee River. I think is what he ran for them back in the '60s and '70s.
Both of them in the wheelhouse?
Yes, sir.
Well, tell me about your father's career.
My dad started out as a cook for ACBL, and he went out. He liked cooking and did a good job for them, and he wanted to do more and started working as a deckhand for ACBL, and worked his way up into the pilot house. And unfortunately, in 1989, he passed away. They were pulled in a lock queue, and they started painting the superstructure of the tugboat, the Richard C. Young ACBL boat, outside of St. Louis, and was outside painting the superstructure and had a heart attack and passed away.
Very sorry to hear that. So that was just that sudden?
Yes.
Hmm.
So it was a really hot day, over 100 degrees, and just had a big heart attack and passed away.
Mm, 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 mm. Well, what was life growing up with the dad that was, or what was his schedule?
He was 30 on, 30 off.
Okay.
So that was a neat but weird schedule. So it seemed like, and I'm sure all tow butters can appreciate this, but those 30 days out were never really 30 days out. They were like 35, 36. And then the time home always seemed short because he was always getting called back.
How long had he been on the river?
He had worked for ACBL for 7 years.
Okay. And how old would you have been in '89?
I would have been 8 years old.
What was life after that? Or I guess right when it happened, and then as you grew up, uh, I guess what steered your professional development?
Well, you grow up fast. I was me and my little sister at the house of my mother, and I took on a lot of responsibility around the house and kind of set me up for my future in the military. After high school, I joined the Marine Corps for 4 years, and I was a military police officer. I worked at the Camp Pendleton Base Brig as a prison guard for 4 years in the Marine Corps out in California. And I got home, and I'd always loved being out on the water. Like I said, I grew up on the Ohio River. And I got home and I was doing my college thing, and I was working for a private security company in Jeffersonville at the Department of Commerce building. And I was down on the water one day at a restaurant there in Jeffersonville with my cousin, and these guys rode up on this little orange boat at one of the restaurants. And I said, "Hey, what do you guys do?" He said, "We're in the Coast Guard." And I said, "What is that all about?" I'd never heard of it, and grew up on the river my whole life. And they said, "We drive that little boat around and check to make sure people have the right safety gear and get people for boating under the influence." And I was like, "Well, I want to do that." So I went to the recruiter, and I said, "That's what I want to do." And 16 years later, my last year in the Coast Guard, I'm finally back home in Louisville, Kentucky, stationed at Sector Ohio Valley. And I've still never driven a little orange boat around and made sure people had the right safety gear, especially on the rivers. I've been a big, we call them big white boat sailors. I've been stationed in the Bering Sea on a 378-foot cutter doing illegal fishing, maritime boundary line excursions with China and other countries, Russia. I've also been the combat systems officer aboard the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Hamilton out of Charleston, South Carolina. And on that boat, I led the tactical law enforcement teams in the apprehension of over $1.9 billion worth of cocaine in 3 different patrols in the Eastern Pacific.
There you have it. Well, let's back up a little bit. Tell me about growing up. Were you drawn to anything in school? I know you said you went to college. How did your academic career develop?
I was an average student in high school, and I went to freshman orientation for Indiana University, and it was weird. It was almost like the military because the guy doing the orientation said, "Look to the left, look to the right. Those people probably aren't graduating, and maybe you will." And I said, "Maybe I'm not ready for college." So that's when I joined the Marine Corps. And after you do the Marine Corps for 4 years, you kind of got a direction of where you want your life to go. If you don't, then there's something wrong with you. So I got out and I pursued a business management degree at Indiana Wesleyan University out of Marion, Indiana. And like I said, I met those Coast Guard guys 3 years later as I was nearing the end of my bachelor's degree. And I went and enlisted in the Coast Guard as a petty officer. And I started out actually as a cook, just like my dad for ACBL aboard one of our small construction tenders that works buoys. This one was the Coast Guard cutter Anvil out of Charleston, South Carolina. So we ran sticks from Myrtle Beach down to Savannah, Georgia. Day boards, pulling wreck buoys. Some built some towers in the Charleston Harbor, and that was pretty neat. So I got a taste for the ATON life on that tour. And from there, I got picked up to go to Officer Candidate School in New London, Connecticut, where then after that, I went to the Bering Sea up in Kodiak, Alaska.
Before we get too far into that, tell me about your Marine Corps experience from enlisting to boot camp to 4 years of service.
The Marine Corps was interesting, and I see a lot of people that have joined after me say that they joined the military because of 9/11, and I was actually in the Marine Corps during 9/11. And I think at first I joined the Marine Corps. I wanted to serve my country. My grandpa was in the Army. My other grandpa was in the Army. I had 2 brothers in the National Guard. So my family's always served. However, you don't think about war when you join up during peacetime. And then 9/11 happens. We just got back from a platoon run in the morning. Marines work out every day. That's like all you get paid to do, basically. So we just got back and we're shining our boots and shaving and getting ready to go in at work. And I'm sitting there watching the TV. We always watch the news in the morning. And I saw the first plane, the aftermath. And as we're sitting there, I'm yelling at my buddy and I'm saying, "Hey, Justin, come here, look at this, man. A plane just hit the tower." And right as he came out, the second plane hit the second tower. And we were like, not 30 minutes later, our sergeant's banging on the doors saying, "Nobody can leave base. Nobody can come in. We need you all to go to the gates and stand extra gate watch to make sure that everything's secure." So it was like, it's kind of mind boggling. And that was one of my favorite memories of being in the Marines. Just because you train and train and train, and then knowing that America has the right resources and tools to go take care of whatever our nation's problems are, being terrorists this time, I knew that I was in the right service to take care of everyone's issues. Not 6 months later, George Bush came to our base at Camp Pendleton and saw off the 1st Marine Division, and as they were getting ready to deploy for the invasion. So that was pretty neat too.
And what was your MOS in the Marine Corps?
I was a 5831, so military police / brig guard. So I was in charge of once Camp Pendleton's got 100,000 people aboard that base every day. It's just like a small city, and Marines do lots of stupid stuff, and Navy people there too. And we'd have people in there for murder, rape, assault, and then we'd have people in there for little things like missing 2 days of work without showing up, UA, or we'd have somebody underage drinking, or somebody that tried drugs. So we'd have people, it was a 10-year facility, and we can hold them up for 10 years while they await all their appeals process. And then after those 10 years, they transfer to Fort Leavenworth.
And you did that your whole 4-year term?
Yes, I did. Yep. So
All right.
I did various positions inside the brig. I was the NCO in charge of indoctrination. So when people, being in Marine Corps jail versus civilian jail are two different things. In the Marine Corps brig, you got a yellow line in all the hallways, and you got to stay on the yellow line, and you're still saying yes sir, no sir. You're still getting inspections. You still got to maintain a haircut. It's like a mini boot camp. So it's not a lot of fun.
Well, tell me about your boot camp experience and enlisting in the Marine Corps. How did all that go for you?
I graduated high school, and I told you I went to that college orientation thing, so I knew that wasn't going to be it for me at that time. And the day after graduation, my mom said, you need to start paying me this much rent. You still need to be at home at 10 o'clock at night. And the next day I went and joined the Marine Corps. And I said, I don't want to do that. And the first day at boot camp, when they started yelling at me after I got off the bus, in the back of my head, I was like, man, that $50 my mom wanted a month is not a lot of money. So hindsight's always 2020. I wouldn't be where I am today without the Marine Corps, but there was no way that this guy was doing 20 years of that.
And did you say your father and grandfather were in the military?
Both my grandparents, they were both in World War II. My grandpa Nolan was in an island called New Caledonia, and he was a military policeman that rode a Harley around the island. They held prisoners of war there. So he would ride his Harley around the island, just checking to make sure everything was on the up and up. And then my grandpa Veach, was in the Battle of the Bulge. And I got some neat memorabilia from him. I got a German Luger and all kinds of little war trophies that he brought back home. But he's got an interesting story. He was a Hollywood cameraman, actually out in Hollywood, California. And so when he enlisted, he was in the Army. He was a corporal, but he was a wartime cameraman. So, with I don't know, like an Army reporter, like capturing stuff on the front lines and stuff. But during the Battle of the Bulge, he was told to put down his camera and here's your rifle, because everybody needed to fight.
Right.
So that's pretty cool. He actually transmitted a letter from the headquarters to the front lines. He carried it out and delivered it to all the frontline commanders. It was from General Patton to the General Middleton that had held Bastogne during the Battle of the Bulge, and told him it was a stroke of genius that he held this for these many days and waited until relief, because it turned the tide of the war. So I got a copy of that letter. It's pretty neat.
So jumping back to where I cut you off last time, I think you said you're in the well, let me was there a Coast Guard station before the Bering Sea, or was that your first assignment?
Yeah, the first assignment was Charleston, South Carolina, as an enlisted guy. I actually came in the Coast Guard. I went to the recruiter and I said, hey, I want to join. And I told him I'm a prior service Marine. And he said, oh, I don't know, man. We don't like to take Marines. And I don't know if he was just joking or what, but I said, I really want to join. And so he said, I'll think about it. And I came back the next week and I said, I really want to do this, man. He said, well, go join the Navy Reserves as a bosun's mate and learn about a seagoing service. And I was like, the Marines are a seagoing service. And so I did. I went and joined the Navy Reserves for 2.5 years in Louisville, Kentucky. And I made torpedo covers and rack curtains for ships. and not the funnest time in the world. And it allowed me to finish my college degree. But I came back to the same recruiter 2.5 years later and said, "Hey, man, I've been doing this Navy thing, like you said, but I really want to join the Coast Guard." And he's like, "You really did that?" And I was like, "Yeah, I sure did." And he's like, "Well, I guess I got to let you in now, but I can only give you these three jobs." And he said, "You want to be a gunner's mate?" And I asked him, I said, "Do everybody clean their own guns?" And he said, "No, you clean everybody's guns. In the Marine Corps, you clean your own guns." So I said, I don't want to do that. And then he said, "I could be a OS, like a radio person." And I was like, "Well, what do they do?" He said, "They're in the belly of the ship. It's really cold in there and dark." And I said, I got to see some sunlight." And then he said, "What about being a cook?" And, my dad started out on the boats as a cook, and I've always liked to cook. And he said, "If you do that job, they're even giving $25,000 enlistment bonuses right now." And all of a sudden, I had this flash of Steven Seagal and Under Siege cookie come in my head. And I was like, I'm going to do that. I'm going to be a tactical cook. And so that's what I did for 2.5 years. And I applied to OCS and got in the first time. And became an officer.
Tell me about OCS.
Uh, Coast Guard OCS was tough. It was harder than Coast Guard boot camp. Marine Corps boot camp was way harder than both of them. Coast Guard OCS, the standard of people that come in there are really high grade people. The instructors are top notch, and I think they turn out a really good product.
What was a day in the life at OCS?
A lot of reading. Me being a cook, I was kind of behind the eight ball, even though I'd been on the little buoy boat in Charleston. But a lot of deck watch officer tests, rules of the roads test, which all benefited me because that's what I wanted to do, is drive boats. But a lot of studying, a lot of cracking books, a lot of getting yelled at, rooms inspections, uniform inspections, that type stuff. Not a lot of PT. We went in the winter time. I got there right after the holidays in early January. And up in New London, Connecticut, I think there was snow and ice on ground the first 3 months. And those first 3 months are the ones they really like hammer home the physical fitness. And we could never go outside because there was always ice and snow outside. So we were very limited in getting beatings, as they call them.
So you finish OCS and your first posting is in the Bering Sea. Is that correct?
Kodiak, Alaska. And I put down every ship, Tim, that the Coast Guard had, but no boats in Kodiak, Alaska were on my list. None. So they called me an hour before they give out assignments on stage, and they say, "Hey, Tim, come here. We got to talk to you." And they're like, "Hey, great news. We got you a boat." And I'm like, "Awesome. You're going to have to bring some flannel lined blue jeans, and you're going to have to get some extra tufts, and you'll fit right in Kodiak, Alaska." And I looked at them with this 1,000-yard stare. I just had a brand new baby at the time. She was only 4 months old. And I was like, "You got to be kidding me." And they're like, "That's all we got for you, man. Kodiak, Alaska, or you're not getting underway." And, I've always had a calling, a yearning to go to sea. And I really wanted to do it. And I'm thankful for it, because never in a million years would you have told me I've gotten to see the things I've been able to see on a Coast Guard ship. And people don't understand that the Coast Guard goes everywhere in the world. Not as much as the Navy, but we go everywhere, and we do all kinds of good missions and missions that really support the government and industry as a whole, the prosperity of a lot of Americans, whether it's fishermen, whether it's moving barges on the inland river system, coastal buoys to guide in freighters, safeguarding our facilities and our cargo storage areas on the east, west coast, the Gulf of Mexico. We do a lot of stuff that's worthwhile. And I feel like we get the taxpayer, out of all the branches of the military, the best bang for their buck, stuff that they can see every day.
Tell me about arriving in Alaska for the first time.
Well, we stayed on base, and the housing there is from the 50s. And it's all steam heated. It's a big steam plant. So it's one of these heater systems. Either it's off and you freeze, or it's on and you burn up. So to compensate that, you crack every window in the house to kind of get this equilibrium of heat. And I'll never forget the first day there, my neighbor introduced himself, and we're out there talking, drinking some beers. And my wife came outside and she said, "It's time to come in." And it was still daylight, because it's daylight there all day long. And I said, "What time is it?" And she goes, "It's 1:30 in the morning." I'd posted up on that fence talking to him for 4.5 hours, lost track of time because it didn't get dark. And that was neat. And then our house was right next to the airstrip. So out our back window, you could see the C-130s and the helicopters taxiing, and you'd hear them taking off at all hours of the night for search and rescue missions. And I used to be a big runner. I wish I was still a big runner, but I'd have to take a can of bear spray with me on runs there. So that was interesting. There's more grizzly bears in Kodiak, Alaska than there is people.
No kidding. Well,
Yeah.
what were you doing for the Coast Guard up there?
I was the gunnery officer and the training officer aboard the U.S. Coast Guard Cutter Monroe. That was one of our 378s that have since been decommissioned. And we did Bering Sea fishery patrols where we guarded or where we boarded mostly longliner and halibut fishing boats. I didn't mess around too much with the crab boats. That's more of a seasonal thing. I did that, and then we also did an international patrol in the Sea of Japan and the South China Sea. We interdicted a Chinese fishing boat. I don't know if you could do this nowadays, but we interdicted a Chinese fishing boat that was catching everything that it could. It had a mile-long gill net thrown out. It was catching whales, sharks, everything. And this is why our fishery system up there is the world's largest, most vital marine biomass in the world, because we regulate it. There's fishing agents up there, the Coast Guard, making sure that fishermen catch and we sustain the fishery for future generations. The Chinese and Russians have overfished their fishing grounds so much that they have to resort to throwing out a mile-long gill net and just catch everything. So we seized this vessel, and I guess I'd been an officer for 6 months, and I got my first command of a ship. So right as we got on this boat, we were detaining them, waiting for the State Department telling us that we could seize the vessel. Class 3 Typhoon was coming in, and I was on this 60-foot trawler with a crew that didn't speak in English. We had a translator, and this Typhoon was coming in. All of a sudden, we were beset in 20, 30-foot seas. This boat had no life raft. All we had was our little inflatable life jackets. It was really scary time. I know the master come up in the pilot house and told the translator in Japanese, and I said, "I don't need a translation for that." He said, "We're all gonna F and die." And this boat was it wouldn't pass up chapter M. This boat had an oiler. There was a position on there for an oiler. It had the valve covers were taken off, and every 30 minutes he had to go squirt oil in the valves. And so I rode out a class 3 Typhoon on a 60-foot Chinese fishing trawler for 3 days, thinking I was going to die. And I look back on all that now, and I'm just like, man, that's one of the things I can't believe I did. So that was pretty cool.
How many men had boarded with you?
4.
Okay.
So I was the assistant boarding officer, a boarding officer, 2 other petty officers, and then the translator.
So out there bobbing around for 3 days, you said. Then what on that story?
We ended up seizing the boat. The State Department had talked, and we ended up seizing the boat, and we took it halfway back to Dutch Harbor, Alaska. Another boat came and relieved us, and they ended up taking it into Dutch Harbor. That's the big fishing communities town in the Aleutian chain, and it sat there for 6 months. They were trying to give it to some down on their luck fishermen, raffle it off or something. But by the time it got back, it was infested with rats. And 6 months later, the city of Dutch Harbor just wanted it gone. So they took it out and used it as target practice and made an artificial reef.
Okay. And what about the crew that was on board?
I don't know whatever happened to them. I know that they were probably charged in a federal district court for illegal fishing, poaching. They had broken all kinds of international maritime law. Uh, Fanning sharks is illegal. Catching whales is illegal. Um, and the gill net that they're using, 1 centimeter in between that is illegal. So there was all kind of international law that they had broken. I'm sure that they ended up doing some time, whether that was in the U.S. or they're sent back to their country to do time.
Any other good stories from your time up there in Alaska?
Yeah, I got to go to Adak and Attu, Alaska. Those are two other Aleutian chains, and both of those islands were Japanese held during World War II, which is really cool. You get to see the old pillboxes and the bunkers. And Attu is an uninhibited island. Nobody lives there anymore. We used to have a small Coast Guard radio station there during the Cold War times, Loran, and nobody's there anymore. And that's got the best salmon run that I've ever fished in my whole life because nobody fishes it. You wade out there and it's like you could just pick them up with your hands. You didn't even need a rod and reel, and that was some of the best salmon eating that I've ever done in my life. We used to stop on the way back from patrol at this place called Albatross Banks, and the back of Coast Guard big white boats, or they're white, and the back of our fantail area of our boat uh, would be blood soaked red from all the halibut we were slaying. And we had a system. We had the freeze dryer and the vacuum sealer, and we'd have the cooks out there filleting them. And everybody at your house, you'd have a deep freeze. And I probably had 40 pounds of halibut in my deep freeze at the house after every patrol. And you don't realize the freshness of the seafood, the crab, the halibut, the salmon, the trout that you get up there, and you're eating it like the same day. And when you come back down here to the States and you see the fish, it's like it just doesn't compare. So that's about all that happened in Alaska. I had a really good tour out there. I learned a lot of stuff. My bosses that I had, the captain and then my department head, were some of the hardest bosses I've ever had, but they kind of set me up for the rest of my career. You sometimes you get those bosses in your life and you're like, man, I can't wait to get out of here. This guy's always in my stuff. And I wasn't real polished. I was a Marine. I was a cook in the Coast Guard, and I had a lot of catching up to do. And they held me to a higher standard. And I would say the rest of my career, every job I've had has been easier because that first tour was hard. From that job, I went on to Portsmouth, Virginia for 4 years. I spent 2 years as the ATON operations manager. So I managed 3 175 buoy tenders, 3 construction tenders, and 3 Weidels. That's our little ice breaking tugs up in Baltimore, the Chesapeake Bay, and Delaware Bay. And after that, I did 2 years as the 5th District Admiral's Aide and traveled all through the mid-Atlantic with him. I got to do some cool stuff with him. Probably my best thing in that job was the 200th anniversary of the Star Spangled Banner riding. So that was really cool at Fort McHenry in Baltimore. We were watching this huge fireworks show, and I was on the small boat. The vice president and members of cabinet, Speaker of the House were all at Fort McHenry watching this fireworks show. And all of a sudden, the Secretary of the Navy came out and said he had to be somewhere, and his car was backed up and he couldn't get out. And he asked if he could get on the small boat that the Coast Guard had, that we had brought over the admirals to attend this event. And I said, sure. And he said, I need to go over that hotel over there. And about halfway to the hotel, he said, just stop right here. I just wanted to see the fireworks from a better point of view. So that was pretty cool. He gave us his coin for taking him out on the water and letting him drive the boat and watch the fireworks. So that was neat.
And what came after that duty station?
That's when I went to the department head on the U.S. Coast Guard Cutter Hamilton at Charleston, South Carolina, as the combat systems officer.
Tell me everything you can about that posting.
That was a pretty interesting job. I worked for my captain went on to make admiral after that tour. He was the kind of guy that if you gave 150% for him, he would fall on a sword or do whatever he could for you. And he rode us hard. We worked harder every day, but he was the kind of guy, he would write you that award. He'd put you in for that good recommendation. He would help you get your dream job. He just demanded a lot out of you. So I got there right as the boat had come to life. It was a brand new ship. They hadn't been on any official patrols yet. And on our first patrol down in the Eastern Pacific, that's on the other side of the Panama Canal, we ended up busting 13 go fast boats. And at the time, and to my awareness, that's still a record for an individual ship. We had enough cocaine inside our boat from all those drug busts to fill up a 5,000 square foot house.
No kidding.
Is a lot of drugs.
Yeah.
So that mission's pretty cool. The first patrol that you do when you go and you bust these drug runners, a lot of adrenaline. You're just go, 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 chase them, get them. But after that, they're one and all the same. A lot of you learn after you talk to a lot of the intel people that the guys that we're busting, they're not the cartels, they're not the drug runners per se. It's forced labor. The cartel will go into a fishing village, they'll hold some family ransom or kidnap some people, and they'll tell the dad and a son, or I had two 15-year-old brothers that were told, take this boat, follow this compass in this direction to Mexico, and call when you can see land, and we'll send somebody out to get you. And you start realizing that, these aren't the real criminals. These are just mules. And I oftentimes think, like most people in America, I think everybody in America's got a family member that does meth or heroin or pills or something like that. I hope there are families that don't, but unfortunately I do. My nephew just passed away last year of an overdose due to fentanyl. And I think of all the family members in our country, and I don't have any friends. I don't know anybody that has the money to do the cocaine that we were catching. And I think while it's a noble thing that the Coast Guard does, I wish we could do more at home to keep the drugs out of our communities that are killing people. To my understanding, cocaine's a rich person drug, and it makes you feel good. But when you are affected in your home and in your family, the way I've been the last couple of years with fentanyl and meth and pills and all that stuff, it's kind of sobering. And I just have a different worldview now of that. I don't regret doing it. And it's good that we take some drugs off the street. But I think somebody told me if Warren Buffett was a cartel leader and he knew the Coast Guard was busting 1 in every 4 boats that he sent, Warren Buffett would send 8 boats. And that's what the cartel does. So we capture a small fragment of what's sending, and and some of these boats, I'm sure we're being baited. Go get these easy 2 over here while 6 slip by the other direction. Because if you pull up the Eastern Pacific on a map, that's a large body of water. And they're running from Ecuador or Guatemala up to Mexico. And we can't be everywhere. There's usually 1 or 2 boats in theater. And then you got a couple of maritime patrol aircraft flying over thousands of miles of ocean looking for a 20-foot boat. That's just my take. It was a very rewarding career in the sense that we accomplished a lot. I had a really good crew that worked for me. I was in charge of about 30 people. And we organically trained our boarding team members. Usually a lot of these boats will have to solicit from outside units or tactical law enforcement teams, because not everybody can train the level of people to a certain level that they need, but we were able to do that organically. So a lot of those drug busts were made by people that I trained and worked for me, and that's rewarding. I've had 4 officers that worked for me on that boat, and 3 of the 4 have gone on to command their own patrol boats.
Well, good to go. What happened next in your career?
Uh, that's when I had a major life change. I went through a divorce. Um, these boats that I was on are gone 4 and 5 months at a time. Again, not like the Navy, but it's a long time. And my ex-wife just got tired of it, and she didn't want to do that anymore. And I got a divorce, and it was about 6 months later I met my new wife. Not that I got married instantly, but I'd met somebody new, and I had made the conscious decision that I didn't want to be on a boat anymore, at least doing that kind of stuff, gone away. And my kids were getting older, and my new wife wanted to have a baby, so I wanted to be home more. And the detailer, they don't like that when you change careers. I was a cutterman, and then I was looking to become a prevention officer, and they don't like it when a senior lieutenant that they've groomed to do a certain job changes jobs mid-career. So that's what led me down to Morgan City, Louisiana, as the vessel traffic service director there at Berwick Bay. And to tell you the truth, Tim, that was my best tour in the entire 20 years of my Coast Guard Marine Corps career.
And I certainly want to get into it. But prior to that, you said kids. I heard about the 4-month-old when you went to Alaska. How many children did you have with your first wife?
I had 2 with her.
Okay.
Yeah. And now I got 5. So, and I'm done. There's no more kids.
5 is plenty, I think.
Yeah.
How old are they all?
I got a 15-year-old boy, a 13-year-old daughter, a 10-year-old son, a 4-year-old daughter, and a 6-month-old daughter.
No kidding. What is it? Is there any suggestion in the oldest couple that they might pursue the military?
Um, my son wants to get into the law enforcement, but he wants to be a conservation officer.
Okay.
He's into hunting and agriculture and that type of stuff. And I think that's where his heart wants to be. He loves being outdoors in the woods and stuff. And then my daughter has aspirations of being an artist. She's a really good artist, and she wants to go to art school. My middle son, um, I think he's maybe the one that might go in the Coast Guard. But and then the little 2 are just so little, they don't know what they want to do.
Right. I wouldn't expect the 6-month-old know what he or she wants to do in 20 years. But nonetheless, so back to where we met, of course, in Morgan City. I'm not sure how long you had been posted there when I
Yeah,
took over Canal. So I was
there from
March of 2019 is when I took over.
I was there from 17 to 20.
Okay. Well, and of course, I saw the facilities and well, the old and new facilities.
Yeah, the old place. Oh man, what a place!
Yeah.
I was glad to get out of there.
Tell me about that posting. You said it was the best thing you've done. What was so
I tell
fulfilling
you
about
what,
it?
me and my wife still talk about it today. She's from Mississippi, but those people down there on the bayou, um, they give you the shirt off their back. They're some of the best salt of the earth, lovingest people that I've ever met in my life. I mean, just great people. And I tease all the time. My CO down there was Commander Mattern, and she's now the Sector Oil Valley captain of the port here in Louisville now. And I tease her all the time, and I said, you could go down there and be mayor in Morgan City. They loved you so much. And she jokes and she said, you're not far from the truth. But just good people. And then the food is just amazing. I think I gained 20 pounds down there. Everything fried. I remember we lived over on Bayou Black on the water in Homa. And I'll tell you 2 stories. The first day after I woke up, the first night we stayed in this 3-story townhouse, I look out in the little bay where all the boats are moored, and I seen the sun come up, and I was like, "Oh, this is beautiful. This is great." I had a really nice boat, and I'm excited to get out in the water. And then I look down there, and my wife's like, "What are all those little shiny things in the water?" And there were alligator eyes. And I was like,
Welcome home.
"Yeah, I had the wrong kind of boat. I had a wakeboarding boat, and I think I only splashed it 3 or 4 times the whole time we were down there. And so that was one story. And the second story is one day I hooked into a gar, a big old alligator gar. It had to have been 3 or 4 feet long, and I was using steel braided uh, line. And I yelled up at the house, told my wife, said, "Bring my snips down. I need to cut this line," because I wasn't messing with this gar. And I had this French Cajun guy that worked on a oil rig offshore. Half the people down there work offshore. And he said, "Oh no, hold on, Tim." And he kills his wife to bring him his club. And I pull this gar up on the bank, and it's flipping around, big old alligator gar. He comes over and starts beating the snot out of it and says, "Ooh, we gonna make some gar balls." And his dude had an industrial grade fryer on his back porch. And he yells up at his wife. He says, "Get that Holy Trinity going, girl." And he starts cutting up his green peppers, onions, and celery, and gets the breading out. He's like, "Oh, you're gonna love these gar balls." And I'm telling you, Tim, I ate some stuff down there that was good. That wasn't one of them. And one day he'd put out traps on the back porch, and he caught a Nutra rat, and he made Nutra like boudin balls, and he tried to get me to eat one of that. West Texas crane. He went crane hunting one time. I wasn't a fan of that. Just everything, man. It was just like, you can't make this stuff up. But that was a good tour. That's by far my favorite tour. And then getting to work with the tugboaters for the first time in my life. My dad being a tugboater, and interacting and being a facilitator of safe commerce and trying to keep ports open after the hurricanes that we had down there, trying to expedite getting stuff open as fast as possible, knowing that, time is money, and it's just not the companies making money, but it's the product coming to market that helps reduce cost on taxpayers and citizens. I think a lot of times that the general public looks at tugboat companies like, oh, they're losing money, or they don't understand a lot of times these are fixed prices. So, it's based on a contract at a fixed price. And I'm sure there's time delays or whatever in there, but it's really benefits you for that boat getting there faster to keep the goods and services flowing. That's our economic lifeline of our country. And I don't think people quite understand how much commerce is moved on our inland river system. A lot of other countries in the world are jealous that we have the naturally deep channels that we have on the Ohio, Mississippi, Missouri rivers, Tennessee, Cumberland. Other countries don't have that luxury as we do. And it just so happens it's right in the heartland of our country, the breadbasket of our country. So whether it's corn coming from the fields of Nebraska or Kansas, or it's coal coming from Kentucky, it's all getting funneled down those tributaries into the Mississippi. And being able to expedite the flow of commerce throughout the world, and dealing with emerging issues and coming up with creative solutions to keep that vital economic lifeline open, that was worthwhile to me. I don't think there's any other job in the Coast Guard besides being a CO of your own boat that you're invested with so much authority as the vessel traffic director, because you have direct captain of the port authority. I can shut the waterway down as long as something happened in the vessel traffic zone. If a boat wreck and sank, I don't have to call the captain. I just shut it down. It better be for a good reason. But I love that job. I love the people, that I worked for. I love the port partners there, Mac and Morgan City. I mean, just like great people.
And remind me, I think you said when we met, Morgan City and somewhere in Seattle are the only two federally regulated waterways. I forgot what you told me.
We actually have Seattle's actually the biggest vessel traffic zone in the country, and that small Morgan City number of boats that come through our zone is actually the second busiest. And that's not by volume. That's just the amount of boats that come by a day. There's actually 13 vessel traffic zones in the country. Houston has one, New Orleans, Seattle, Los Angeles, Jacksonville, Florida, St. Petersburg. Louisville has one during high water. Sault Ste. Marie. Um, I know I'm missing a couple other ones. Port Arthur has one. So they're spread out. And the reason that we have vessel traffic areas is to reduce and mitigate risk associated with the vessel traffic. A lot of this came from vessel elisions out in the San Francisco Bay, where boats alighted during fog, and there was no means of communication, and people weren't using their radar, and so they decided to implement vessel traffic services to be that extra layer of security to keep maritime commerce flowing.
Where did your career take you after you left Morgan City?
So after Morgan City, I wanted to get closer to home, and I followed my old XO, Luis Carmona. He was the commanding officer up at Paducah. I called in a bunch of FONA friends, and I went up to Paducah, and that's where I got introduced into the marine inspections. And as you know, I feel like there's a lot of places on the river where you could say that this town's a tugboat community or this or that. Paducah to me is the mecca of the inland waterways. That from Cairo to Paducah, I mean, you think you see a lot of it down in New Orleans or the Houston Ship Channel. There's a lot of stuff going there. But the first time you drive over that bridge into Cairo and you look out and you see that fleet, that barge fleeting area over there with 300 to 400 barges, you're like, wow, this is crazy. And then you go up the upper Mississippi River. I was the waterways chief out there as well. And you go up to Cape G and you'd see these guys pushing 40 barges downbound with rocks on either side and having to flank around every bend and turn and back down to get around turns. And I was like, you could, I'd have a heart attack driving a tugboat like that. So, it's dealing with six packs down in Morgan City. That's the biggest thing that would come through or was allowed to come through. Then being on the big river and seeing guys push 40 is crazy. And then you throw in high water and extreme low water, and it's just nuts. It's nuts. So I did that job for 2 years. I got my inspection quals on ITVs and barges. I spent a lot of time over at your all's barge facility maintenance place in Metropolis. That was like a once a weeker. You all got really good people over there. We love Tyler Simmons. He's great. He runs a tight shop. Spent a lot of time over at ACBL in Cairo, TVT, Inland Marine, and Paducah, James Marine. Really, if you're in the tugboat community and you've never been to Paducah or Cairo, I would question how much you know about the tugboat community. Because if it just happens there, you look at as far as the inland waterways, and everybody's coming up on subchapter M dry dock availability and stuff, and there's no dry docks in St. Louis or Cincinnati or Louisville, maybe a couple in Nashville, but all the dry docks are in Paducah and Cairo, and that's where stuff happens. So that was a good job. It was rewarding to see and talk. I'm used to driving boats and being up in the wheelhouse, and then to get down in the engine rooms and inside of barges and respond to casualties and sinkings, getting to see from a different perspective and have a greater appreciation for what it is that you guys do on the river.
And is that is that the step before this current job?
Yeah, that was spent 2 years there, and I got another sweetheart deal. So I'm from Jeffersonville, Indiana, and a job came open in Louisville, and it's really hard to transfer for somewhere for 1 year. But there's more opportunities for new people in Paducah than there is in Louisville. So I called in every phone a friend. There might have been a couple bottles of bourbon exchanged to get this job, but I ended up coming up to Louisville to do waterways. So in Paducah, I was in charge of waterways, but it's just a small section. You have 80 miles of the Tennessee and Cumberland, 80 miles of the upper, 80 miles of the lower Mississippi, and then 60 miles of the Ohio. And it's a very critical section of river there. I felt like it just never stopped. always something going on, always somebody running into a bridge or grounding or whatnot. But now I'm in Ohio Valley and I'm in charge of waterways for 13 states, the full stretch of the Ohio River, large chunks of the Cumberland and Tennessee, um, chunks of the Kanawha River. We go into West Virginia, Pennsylvania. So it's been eye opening. I'm getting to really see, I guess, an old analogy, and it came full circle when I was down in Morgan City. I told you I grew up on the Ohio River swimming, and every spring there's always a high water there in Louisville. And you're like, why can't they just turn on the dams full blast and send this water somewhere else? And you do 8 months of high water in Morgan City, and you're praying that they don't turn on the water and stop the water from coming down there. So I've grasped the inland waterways and what the Army Corps and TVA do with water control management on the rivers. And I think a lot of Coast Guard officers that get into waterways specifically, they don't have that full perspective. It's not a job that you're gonna make a 30-year career out of. Um, it's a job that they send a lot of people that are just biding their time waiting to get out of the Coast Guard. And I fully embrace that. And I have a lot of respect for the mariners, what the tugboat community does on the water. And I know when somebody's blowing smoke because I've been there and done that. And so it's been interesting.
So 4 years in the Marine Corps, and now you said 16 years in the Coast Guard. You
Yeah,
sound
I'll be retiring June 13th of this year. So
good for you. What comes next?
I don't know. I've thought about maybe going to the maritime side of the house in the tug community, and I've also thought about just teaching high school history. Um, we're located outside of Lexington, me and my wife and kids, and we live in our dream house, an old 1895 Craftsman style house. It's been totally redone, but it's out in the middle of nowhere. And right now, I drive an hour and 45 minutes to work every day into Louisville, and I can do anything for a year. But I told my wife, I said, I'm just not. The commute after I retire has got to be 15 minutes or less, no traffic. So we'll see if I can find something around here or if there's anything else in the cards.
Well, good for you. That pretty much wraps up my questions. Anything else interesting comes to mind about your career highlights or anything?
It's been, you meet people when you're a young Marine or a young coastie that you think the world of, and they're your heroes, and you look up to them. And someday they come up or out of the woodwork and they're saying, I'm retiring, and you're heartbroken because you look up to this person and you ask them, why are you retiring? You say, they often tell you you'll just know when it's your time, and you don't lose that, or you lose that. It's lost on a young mind. And I'm at the end of a 20-year career, and all I can tell you is it's my time. And the amount of technology that's increased over the last 20 years, the knowledge of young kids that are coming in our service just blows me away every day. And I like to pride myself that I outwork a lot of people, but stuff that takes me 2 hours to do takes some of these young kids 15 minutes. And they're like, let me show you how to do it faster, sir. And you get 3 or 4 times in your career at the end where you hear that, and some other small things that I don't want to get into, but you just know it's your time. And I'm proud of my service to our country. I'm happy for what it's done for me and my family. Uh, it's provided us a good, stable life and a good living. I've been able to take care of my family really well. I've learned a lot. I've seen a lot of the world, and I wouldn't change anything. But it's time to let somebody else carry the torch and lead our country into the future.
Well, I appreciate your time this evening, and I hopefully we can reconnect maybe after you've retired and sorted out what life looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love that, Tim. I wish you and your family all the best, brother.
Thanks a lot, sir.
All right. Thank you. Bye bye.
All right. Well, I'll say we have relatively quiet for the moment, but that was a lie. All right. So you finish up OCS and your first